My name is Elena Marlowe, 38 years old. Thursday evenings always carried the same rhythm for me. The ache in my shoulder from my overstuffed work tote, the fog of spreadsheets and tax codes still clinging to my mind, and the bitter taste of half-finished cafeteria coffee that lingered on my tongue. I was used to routine. I found safety in it. But that night, the rhythm was broken the moment I turned into our driveway. The porch light was already glowing. It should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Simon never remembered to turn it on unless I reminded him over and over again. A cold ripple of unease slid through me as I gripped the doorknob. Inside, the house was unnervingly still. No clatter of our dog's paws on the hardwood, no familiar shuffle from Simon in the kitchen. Instead, muffled voices drifted from the living room, low-pitched, deliberate, and followed by the delicate clink of porcelain on coasters. I stepped in and froze. On our couch sat Giselle, my mother-in-law, legs tucked neatly beneath her, wrapped in her usual beige cardigan like armor. She was cradling one of my favorite mugs, as though it had always been hers. The sight of her in my space, that casual comfort, sent my pulse hammering. Beside her stood Simon, arms crossed, eyes evasive. He looked like a teenager caught sneaking in after curfew. Elena, Giselle purred, turning her head with deliberate slowness. Simon cleared his throat. His voice came flat, rehearsed. The house, it's mine now. Everything's taken care of. The words hit like a slap. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? My voice cracked, brittle. Simon finally met my eyes, though only for a second. We made a decision. You wouldn't let Mom move in. You fought it for years, so I made it happen. You made what happen? Giselle sipped her tea with infuriating calm. This house belongs to me now. That's what Simon told me. He said the paperwork's handled. So really, Elena, there's no reason for you to stay. I blinked, staring at Simon. He didn't deny it, not once. Simon, I said, my hands trembling, you can't just tell someone a house is theirs. That's not how it works. He shrugged, almost smug. You've always acted like this house was yours alone. Now it's not. Fair's fair. Fair? The word twisted like glass in my chest. I steadied myself, breathing through the rage rising in my throat. I've paid the mortgage every single month for 17 years. $2,300. Not once late. Not once missed. You've never touched it. Simon's jaw tightened. I paid for everything else. Utilities, food, lawn care. I kept the household running. I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You paid for lawn care once, because your mother shamed you about the weeds. And groceries? You bought them 3 times last year, only because I was pulling 14-hour shifts during tax season. That's not the point, he snapped. You made Mom feel unwelcome. This house was always supposed to be shared with her after Dad passed. You knew that. No, you decided that, I shot back. I never agreed. She's family, Simon said coldly. So am I, or at least I thought I was. The silence that followed felt like a blade suspended between us. Giselle set her mug down with a soft clink, smiling like a woman already victorious. Let's not drag this out, Elena. Just start packing. You can stay with a friend for now. You're independent, aren't you? Her condescension made my stomach twist. You're really this confident? Simon promised me I'd be taken care of, she replied smoothly. The house is settled. Honestly, you should be grateful we didn't just change the locks. I scanned the room. Our couch I'd hunted down on clearance, the rug my mother helped me move in, the side table I assembled alone while Simon claimed exhaustion. Every corner of the living room pulsed with pieces of me, yet they sat there erasing me from it all. This house has always been mine, I whispered, low and steady. Simon rolled his eyes. You think paying the mortgage gives you all the power? Yes, I said flatly. That's literally how it works. His temper flared. He stepped closer, voice rising. You refused to compromise. You acted like everything was yours. Your job, your money, your space, because I didn't contribute the way you wanted. Because I was the only one contributing consistently, I snapped back. My throat burned with unshed tears, but I refused to let them fall. I gave you my life, Simon shouted. I gave you my time, my energy, my support. I stared at him, feeling the final threads of our marriage unravel. You gave me dirty laundry, resentment, and a mother who never hid her dislike of me. Giselle scoffed. Maybe if you'd been warmer. Oh, you mean more obedient? Simon dragged a hand down his face. You're making this ugly. No, I said, straightening my shoulders, my voice like stone. I'm making it clear. You think I'll roll over just because you say so? You can't stop it, Giselle declared, rising from the couch. It's already in motion. I met her gaze, unflinching. Then let it roll, but I won't be here to cushion the crash. Each step up the staircase felt like a countdown. In the bedroom, I pulled out my old travel suitcase. My movements were mechanical, folding a few days' worth of clothes, sliding in toiletries, charger, laptop, jewelry, decor, my favorite blanket. All of it stayed. Let them choke on the weight of what they thought they'd taken. When I came back downstairs, Simon hovered near the door. Giselle was already rearranging the throw pillows as if this had always been her home. You're really leaving? Simon asked, his tone suddenly soft, uncertain. I looked him straight in the eye. You sure you want me to? His jaw flexed. You're the one leaving. No, I corrected him. You kicked me out. He looked away, his voice low. This will be better in the long run. For who? I demanded. He didn't answer. I have one question, I said quietly. Did you ever read the mortgage agreement? He frowned. What does that have to do with anything? I smiled, tight and cold. Exactly. Giselle called after me as I reached the door. Don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. I paused, hand on the knob. Don't worry, I'm only taking what's mine. She didn't realize how literal I was being. That night, I checked into a modest downtown hotel. A queen bed with a sagging mattress, water-stained ceiling, thin curtains. But it was quiet, clean, empty of their voices. I ordered takeout and sat cross-legged on the bed in silence. Then I pulled out the folder I'd been hiding in the back of my work tote for over a year. Mortgage statements, closing documents, tax records, every line bearing one name, mine. I had seen this storm gathering long ago. Simon's festering resentment, Giselle's creeping intrusions, the little remarks that grew into demands. The day Simon refused to co-sign the mortgage, too afraid of commitment, I had made my choice. I'd shoulder the debt, but I'd own everything it built. I took out my phone, opened Brad's number, and hit record. Hey, Brad, it's Elena. I need your help. It's about the house. I've been patient long enough. I sent it, switched off the lamp, and slid under the covers. For the first time in 17 years, I slept without anxiety gnawing at my chest. I slept like someone who held all the leverage and none of the guilt. The hotel room was nothing special, but to me, it felt like freedom in disguise. A sagging queen mattress, a ceiling stained with years of leaks, curtains that couldn't quite shut out the city lights. Yet the air was silent, stripped of Simon's sharp sighs and Giselle's passive-aggressive remarks. For the first time in years, I could hear my own breathing without interruption. On the bedside table lay the folder I'd carried around like a secret weapon, tucked away in the back of my work tote. My hand hovered over it, hesitant, as though touching it would set everything in motion. But the truth was, motion had already begun the moment I walked out that front door. I opened the folder and spread the papers across the bed like cards in a high-stakes game. Mortgage statements, closing documents, tax records, every page stamped with one name, mine. The weight of 17 years of payments stared back at me, $2,300 every month, chipped away from my salary, from promotions earned through long nights and endless audits. Simon never once offered to split it. A bitter laugh slipped from my throat. He didn't even know what was in this folder. He never asked. All he knew was how to accuse me of control, how to resent me for building stability when he refused to anchor himself to anything. As I sifted through the papers, memories rushed forward uninvited. I remembered the day we bought the house. Simon had been jittery, his palms damp as we sat across from the lender. When the officer slid the mortgage agreement across the table, Simon pushed it back, shaking his head. I can't, he muttered. Debt gives me panic attacks. His mother, sitting smugly in the corner, had nodded as though that settled everything. I'd taken the pen without hesitation. I knew what it meant. I shouldered the risk, but I also claimed the right. Simon saw weakness in that moment. I saw ownership. Back then, I told myself love was about compromise, that his fear of debt was just a flaw I'd learned to work around. But compromise turned into sacrifice, and sacrifice calcified into resentment. The more I carried, the lighter his load became, until he convinced himself it was equal. Another memory surfaced. Giselle standing in my kitchen, rearranging my spice rack. It's more practical this way, she'd said. Simon hovered behind her, silent, approving. Little invasions that felt harmless at the time, but each one chipped at the foundation of my home until I realized she wasn't visiting. she was staking claim. I shook off the memory and returned to the present, flipping through receipts I'd kept with the meticulousness of a CPA. Furnace replacement in 2016, paid in full by me. Roof repairs in 2018, me again. The funeral expenses for Simon's father, covered from my savings because Simon couldn't handle it right then. Line after line, a ledger of a life I funded while they took it for granted. The knock on the door startled me. My heart leapt, irrational fear clawing at my chest. For a split second, I imagined Simon on the other side, demanding I come back, dragging Giselle in behind him with her smug little smirk. But it was only the delivery boy with my dinner. I thanked him, tipped too generously out of nerves, then locked the door tight. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, I opened my takeout and pushed the food around without eating. My appetite had vanished, replaced by the thrum of a single thought. It was time to use this folder. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name, Brad Concade. We hadn't spoken much since high school, but I knew what he'd become. Back then, he was the boy who cheated off my AP history quizzes, calling me Ruthless Elena when I corrected even the teacher's math. Now, he ran one of the biggest real estate brokerages in the county. If anyone could turn this situation into a weapon, it was Brad. I hesitated before hitting record. My reflection in the darkened TV screen looked unfamiliar, tired, furious, but sharpened by resolve. "Hey, Brad," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "It's Elena. I need your help. It's about the house. I've been patient long enough." I ended the recording and sent it. No explanations, no apologies, just the truth condensed into a battle cry. When I finally lay back on the bed, staring up at the water-stained ceiling, I realized how light I felt. Not happy. No, happiness was still far away, but free in a way I hadn't been for years. Free of pretending, free of managing Simon's moods, free of bracing for Giselle's subtle digs. I thought of Simon's face when I asked him if he'd ever read the mortgage agreement. The blank confusion in his eyes. He'd spent years resenting me for the control he thought I lorded over him, never realizing the control had been mine by default, by law, by ink on paper. He thought love was about balance, but what he really wanted was power. He'd underestimated me. Both of them had. The clock ticked past midnight, each second stretching into a kind of silence I hadn't felt in years. My phone stayed dark. No calls, no messages. I almost laughed at the thought of Simon explaining my sudden absence to Giselle. Would he admit I walked out? Or would he paint himself the victim, abandoned by the woman who never appreciated him? It didn't matter. Soon the story wouldn't be his to tell. As I drifted toward sleep, another memory flashed, unbidden. Simon years ago, whispering in the dark, "You don't need anyone else. You have me." I remembered how safe it felt in that moment, how young and foolishly certain I'd been. Now, lying alone in a cheap hotel room, I finally understood the truth. I never really had him. He had me, until tonight. When morning came, the light through the curtains was pale and thin. I ordered black coffee from the lobby cafe and sat in a quiet corner with the folder by my side. My hands no longer trembled when I touched it. It wasn't just paperwork anymore. It was my shield, my sword, my escape route. At 8:02 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new text. From Brad. "Let's talk this morning. Come by the office." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was happening. As I packed the folder back into my tote, a strange calm washed over me. The war had begun, yes, but this time I wasn't the one caught off guard. I was the one setting the terms. I looked in the mirror before leaving, smoothing my hair, adjusting the strap of my bag. For the first time in years, I recognized the woman staring back. She wasn't cold. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't the villain Simon and Giselle painted her to be. She was ready. Brad's office smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive cologne, the kind that lingered even after its wearer left the room. As soon as I walked through the glass doors, the receptionist recognized me. "Elena Marlowe?" she asked with a smile that was too knowing, as if Brad had warned her I'd be coming. "He's expecting you. Go right in." I tightened my grip on the folder tucked beneath my arm, my armor, my proof, my entire case for why Simon and Giselle's scheme was about to collapse before it even started. When I entered Brad's office, he stood immediately, that same crooked smile from high school lighting up his face. "Well, if it isn't Ruthless Elena," he said, his handshake firm, his eyes glinting with curiosity. It's been a long time, I replied, sliding into the chair across from his massive desk. He gestured toward the folder. Let me guess. House drama? I didn't even bother to sugarcoat it. I opened the folder and spread out the documents across the polished wood. The title deed, the original mortgage agreement, bank statements with my name printed, line after line, 17 years of payments in black and white. My soon-to-be ex-husband told his mother this house belongs to her now, I said evenly. They tried to kick me out. Brad leaned back in his chair, studying me, then the papers. His brows lifted, but he didn't look shocked. If anything, he looked impressed. And you walked away? I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves, I said. And they think they've won. That's their mistake. He tilted his head, lips quirking into a half-smile. So what's the plan? I want to sell the house, fast, legally, and I want them served properly, so there's no room for denial. Brad's grin widened. You don't just want the sale. You want the sale to be the message. Exactly. He opened a drawer, pulled out a stack of listing forms, and slid them toward me. Then let's make it loud and clear. By the time I left his office, the city looked different to me. The skyscrapers no longer loomed. The noise of traffic felt almost like music. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving on the offensive instead of surviving on defense. Back at the hotel, I extended my stay another week. I didn't need luxury. I needed time, and time was now on my side. On Sunday morning, while I was eating breakfast on the hotel balcony, my phone lit up with a blocked number. I let it ring. A minute later, it buzzed with a voicemail. I pressed play. Simon's voice erupted, frantic, unhinged. Elena, what the hell is going on? There's a real estate agent here saying the house is under contract. He says it's already listed. You can't do this. We live here. His panic was like music to my ears. I didn't respond. That same evening, he called again, and again. When I ignored him, Giselle's texts started coming in. Her words were sharp, written in the kind of rage only denial could fuel. You can't sell this house. We have rights. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. Rights? The irony was staggering. I forwarded every message to my attorney, who replied with a calm efficiency that made me want to hug him. All communication documented. Proceed as planned. Monday morning, the notices were delivered to the house. Brad's agent dropped them off in person, watching as Simon's expression cracked. By Tuesday, Simon had escalated to threats of legal action. My lawyer responded within hours, attaching a scanned copy of the deed with my name in bold, along with 17 years of bank statements. His message was short, polite, and devastating. Vacate the premises, or we will file for formal eviction as part of the pending divorce. That shut Simon up for 24 hours. Then, predictably, the calls resumed. This time I answered. Elena, please. Simon's voice was low, urgent, trembling in a way I hadn't heard before. You don't have to do this. I already did, I replied calmly. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'll see you Sunday, 10 a.m. I'm coming to the house. He hesitated. Why? To return what's yours. What's that? His voice cracked. Your consequences. The rest of the week felt like watching a storm brew from a safe distance. I still went to work, still ran through my spreadsheets and deadlines, but beneath the surface, something had shifted. I no longer dreaded going home because that house wasn't my home anymore. I had untethered myself from it, and in doing so, I'd untethered myself from Simon. Yet, at night, in the quiet of the hotel room, guilt tried to creep in. 17 years is a long time to bury memories. I remembered Simon laughing with me in the kitchen while we burned our first attempt at lasagna. I remembered the night he proposed under a cheap string of fairy lights on the back porch. For a moment, I wondered if I was being ruthless, just as Brad once teased. But then I remembered Giselle's smirk as she told me to pack my bags. Simon's silence as she claimed ownership of every corner I had built, their arrogance, their entitlement. That was all the reminder I needed. Each voicemail from Simon grew shorter, more desperate. Each text from Giselle more venomous. And with each one, I felt my spine straighten, my resolve harden. This wasn't just a property dispute. This was war. A silent war I'd been fighting alone for years, finally brought into the open where I had the upper hand. On Friday night, I sat on the hotel bed, folders spread out once again, reading through the documents like scripture. Proof of survival, proof of sacrifice, proof that I wasn't crazy, no matter how many times Simon tried to twist reality. I picked up the deed and ran my fingers over my name. Elena Marlowe, sole owner. It struck me then. They had underestimated me, not because I hid my strength, but because they never believed I had any to begin with. To them, I was just the cold, rigid accountant who worked too much and loved too little. They didn't see the woman who stayed up nights balancing books so the mortgage would be paid. They didn't see the backbone behind the quiet. And on Sunday morning they would. I closed the folder, slid it back into my tote, and switched off the lamp. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I wasn't dreading tomorrow. I was counting down to it. Sunday arrived cloaked in heavy gray clouds, the kind that pressed down on the rooftops and made the air feel thick with warning. My steps on the driveway echoed louder than usual, each one a drumbeat leading toward the inevitable. At 9:59 a.m., I stood at the front door, tote bag hanging from my shoulder, heart steady in my chest. I wasn't afraid anymore. The door opened before I knocked. Simon stood there, his sweatpants wrinkled, hair unwashed, face hollow like he hadn't slept in days. Behind him, in the armchair by the fireplace, sat Giselle. Her arms were folded across her chest, her mug trembling in her lap. Not from fear, but from indignation, boiling just beneath her skin. "What is this?" she barked the moment I stepped inside. I didn't answer her. I walked straight to the dining table, placed my tote down, and began pulling out neat stacks of documents. Contracts, statements, highlighted copies of the title deed. Each paper landed with a deliberate slap against the wood. "I told you," I said calmly, meeting both their eyes. "I'm here to clear things up." Simon hovered in the doorway, pale, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Giselle leaned forward, eyes narrowed, watching me like a hawk circling prey. "Let's start here," I said, sliding the first sheet across the table. The deed. My name bold at the top. "This says I am the sole owner of the house." Simon's face drained of color. "But I thought—" "You thought wrong," I cut in. "You refused to co-sign the mortgage 17 years ago because you didn't want to be tied down. Do you remember that, Simon? You claimed debt gave you panic attacks, so I signed it alone. Every payment, every month came from my account." His lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came out. Giselle slammed her mug onto the coffee table. "That doesn't give you the right to sell it." "It gives me exactly that right," I replied, voice sharp as glass. Her cheeks flushed crimson. "Ungrateful witch. After everything we've done for you—" "You mean after everything I did for you?" My words sliced the air. "The furnace in 2016, paid by me. The roof repairs in 2018, paid by me. The funeral costs for your husband, Giselle, my savings. Simon's car when his credit was shot, mine again. Property taxes, landscaping, plumbing, the fire alarm upgrade. Should I keep going?" Simon slumped into the nearest chair, his shoulders curling inward as though my words were too heavy to carry. "You're bluffing. You couldn't afford all that on your salary. You had a desk job." "That desk job got me promoted," I snapped. "I'm not just a receptionist, Simon. I'm a licensed CPA. I run financial audits for firms that would chew you up and spit you out for sport. I make more than both of you combined." The room went silent. Giselle's eyes widened in disbelief, and Simon stared at his hands as if they were suddenly foreign to him. I reached into my tote one last time and laid down a plain envelope. Giselle eyed it suspiciously. "What's that?" I opened it slowly, savoring the moment, and slid out a series of glossy photos. Simon, arm wrapped around a woman half my age. Another of them kissing behind a parked car. Another, hand in hand, leaving a hotel. Simon's jaw dropped. You hired someone." "I planned ahead," I said, my voice cold but calm. "The day you asked me to hand over financial control of our accounts, I knew something was wrong. I didn't know what, but I knew enough to prepare." "Elena, I can explain to—" "No need." I placed the photos back in the envelope. "My lawyer already has copies. Divorce papers will be delivered by the end of the week. And yes, Simon, I'll be pursuing alimony. 17 years of emotional labor. Now it's billable." Giselle sputtered, rising to her feet, finger jabbing the air. "You heartless—" "No." I cut her off, my voice rising for the first time. "I gave everything. I paid every bill, carried every burden, swallowed every insult. And when I finally asked for space in my own home, you both decided I didn't belong. You kicked me out of the house I built. Now I'm returning the favor." Simon buried his face in his hands. Giselle's mouth opened and closed, words dying on her lips. The balance had shifted. For years, they made me feel like an intruder in my own life, but now, standing there with the proof laid bare, I realized the truth. I was never the intruder. They were. I gathered the papers back into the tote, leaving only the highlighted deed on the table. My name stared up at them like a verdict. "This is over," I said softly, but with a weight that left no room for argument. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked toward the door. My footsteps sounded different now, solid, final. I didn't look back. Outside, the air smelled of rain. Heavy clouds threatened to break at any moment, but for me, it already felt like the storm had passed. I breathed in deeply, clutching the tote close, not out of fear anymore, but triumph. Back in the hotel that night, I called Brad. "It's done," I told him. "How'd they take it?" His voice carried a smile. "Like amateurs," I replied. "We'll close fast. You'll have cash in hand within a month." "Perfect." I hung up and leaned back against the headboard, exhaustion washing over me in waves. For the first time in 17 years, the house wasn't my burden anymore. It was my victory. The war wasn't just about walls and a roof. It was about reclaiming the years I'd poured into a marriage that had withered long ago. And as I closed my eyes, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next would be mine to choose. 2 weeks after the showdown, the house was no longer mine. The sale had gone through faster than I ever imagined, thanks to Brad's ruthless efficiency. He called to confirm the wire transfer while I sat at a sunny cafe near the marina, laptop open, cup of coffee steaming in front of me. The number on the screen stunned me. Even after taxes, legal fees, and every deduction, it was more than I had expected, more than enough to start over. When I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for nearly 2 decades finally eased. The house was gone, cleanly, legally, irrevocably sold, and everything, every cent, every decision had gone through me. I hadn't stepped foot inside since that last confrontation. I didn't need to. The movers retrieved the few items I still wanted. Everything else I left behind on purpose, a silent offering to Simon and Giselle, a reminder of what they thought they owned, but never truly did. Their downfall came quicker than I expected. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learned they'd moved into a rundown rental on the edge of town, a third-floor walk-up with a broken intercom and peeling paint. Giselle had been forced to sell off most of her antique furniture just to cover the deposit. Simon's car was repossessed within a week of the sale. His credit history, already a tangle of short-term jobs and unpaid bills, dragged him into a spiral no charm could talk his way out of. Apparently, he'd started applying for work again, desperate for anyone willing to hire a man in his mid-40s with nothing to show for the last decade but resentment. Employers weren't biting. As for the affair, his so-called fresh start, it fizzled out almost immediately. The girl disappeared once she realized Simon no longer had a house, a car, or a bank account, untouched by garnished alimony payments. I should have felt vindicated. Part of me did, but another part, quieter and more complicated, felt something closer to pity. Watching them crumble wasn't as satisfying as I had once pictured. Their downfall wasn't a fireworks show. It was a slow, pathetic collapse, like a structure eaten hollow by termites until the first storm knocked it flat. Meanwhile, my life was quiet. I didn't buy another house, not yet. Instead, I rented a furnished condo near the marina, smaller than the old place, but filled with sunlight. From the balcony, I could see the boats drifting in and out of the harbor, their sails crisp against the sky. At night, the water reflected the city lights, shimmering like glass. For the first time in years, no one commented on how I arranged the furniture. No one criticized how I folded laundry. I watered the plants when I felt like it. I cooked pasta the way I wanted, without Giselle rearranging the spice rack behind me, or Simon making jokes about my accountant precision. If I didn't feel like cooking at all, I ordered sushi and ate it straight from the box, legs tucked beneath me on the couch. No one asked why. No one sighed. At first, the silence was strange. Eerie, even. After so many years of noise, arguments, guilt trips, passive-aggressive remarks, the absence felt unnatural. I caught myself waiting for Simon's footsteps in the hall, for Giselle's voice carrying from the kitchen. They never came. Slowly, the silence shifted. It stopped feeling like a void and began to feel like space, room to breathe. I worked late when I wanted to, I woke up on Saturdays and walked along the marina, coffee in hand, with no one demanding I rush home. Some days, I did nothing at all. And for once, doing nothing didn't feel like failure. It felt like healing. But ghosts have a way of clinging, even when the people themselves are gone. Sometimes, while brushing my teeth, I'd hear Giselle's voice in my head criticizing how I stacked towels. Sometimes, when I looked at my reflection before work, I'd hear Simon mutter that I cared more about my job title than I did about him. These memories didn't sting the way they used to. They carried a strange clarity, as though someone had lifted a fog. I could finally see what I hadn't wanted to admit. There was never going to be a day they stopped taking. Not until I took myself out of reach. One evening, as I folded laundry in the condo, I realized something almost funny. For years, Simon accused me of being cold, detached, incapable of love. But love had been the very reason I stayed. Love had been the reason I paid, carried, tolerated. If anything, I had loved too much, too hard, until there was nothing left. And then I remembered his face, crumbling, when I laid the photos of his affair on the table. That was the moment the narrative shifted forever. He could no longer paint me as the villain. He had betrayed himself. Life became strangely simple. I still met deadlines, still sat through long client meetings, but at the end of the day, I came home to peace. I ate dinner without tension. I slept through the night. And when I woke up in the mornings, there was no need to brace myself for whatever new demand Simon might make. For months, I had carried the folder like a shield. Now, the folder lived in a drawer, unopened. Not because I didn't need it, but because I no longer feared the fight. I had already won. One Saturday, I ran into Brad at a networking event. He spotted me near the bar and waved me over. "Elena," he said with that same easy grin, "come meet someone." I almost declined, instinctively. Dating was the last thing on my mind. Hell, I was still untying myself emotionally from nearly 2 decades of silence and resentment. But something in his expression, a mix of pride and genuine warmth, made me pause. The man he introduced me to was tall, slightly sun-weathered, his shirt not designer, but perfectly fitted. His name was James. He was a project manager for a renewable energy startup, just back from 3 years in Copenhagen. We talked, nothing heavy, travel, bad airline coffee, favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurants in town. When he found out I worked in finance, he didn't joke about taxes or ask me to fix his QuickBooks. Instead, he asked, "What do you like most about it?" I smiled faintly. That no one expects me to smile while I'm doing it. He laughed. "That's how I feel about budgeting." And just like that, it didn't feel like a setup anymore. Later that night, back in my condo, I sat on the balcony and watched the lights ripple across the marina. My phone buzzed with a new message. Simon. This time not angry, not frantic, just broken. "I'm sorry. I should have listened. I should have appreciated you. I didn't realize how much you carried." I stared at the screen for a long while. Then I typed one line. "You didn't realize because you never tried." I hit send. Then I deleted the entire thread, not out of spite, but out of peace. The past was done. The house was gone. And for the first time in years, my future was mine alone. Weeks folded into each other like linen tucked into a drawer, clean, ordered, and finally mine. The frenzy around the sale faded, the paperwork thinned, and all that was left were ordinary days. Coffee cooling on the balcony, the marina breathing in and out, my inbox humming like a distant highway. Every so often, a memory would surface, the sting of Giselle's critique, the dull thud of Simon's disappointment, but it arrived like a postcard from a place I no longer lived. I would look at it, nod at the handwriting, and set it aside. I didn't try to rush into a new version of myself. I let the quiet instruct me. It taught me the shape of a morning without critique. It taught me that I like the bed angled toward the window because I want the first thing I see to be the sky. It taught me how to be generous with myself without measuring the cost. Some weekends I stayed in pajamas until noon and read accounting fraud case studies for pleasure. Nerdy, unapologetic joy. On others, I walked the length of the pier twice, letting the wind rearrange the heaviness in my chest into something lighter. People always talk about closure as a door slamming shut. Mine felt like many windows opening at once. I ran into Brad again at a charity mixer for small business grants. He was surrounded by clients in sleek jackets and noiseless shoes, speaking in the clipped, buoyant cadence of someone who wins for a living. When he saw me, his grin softened into something like respect. Elena, he said, as if the name itself proved a point. You staying for the panel? Maybe, I said. Depends whether the hors d'oeuvres are honest about being food or just decorations. He laughed, then tilted his head past me. Before you judge the canapés, meet someone. James stood a little apart from the crowd, hands in his pockets, the shape of a man who listens before he speaks. He wasn't overly polished. That relaxed me more than I expected. Up close, I noticed faint sun lines fanning from the corners of his eyes, the kind you earn by working outdoors, and smiling anyway. Hi, he said. James Sutter. Elena, I replied. Marlowe. Brad drifted away like a tide going out, leaving us in a quiet cove amid the room's chatter. Our conversation started where all harmless small talk starts. Flights that never arrive on time, the lie of complimentary coffee, the strange intimacy of airport bookstores. James had just returned from 3 years in Copenhagen managing wind farm deployments. He described the way turbines sound up close, less like machinery, more like a slow breathing, and I surprised myself by wanting to hear more. When he asked what I do, I braced for the joke. You do my taxes? Can you fix my cousin's QuickBooks? Instead, he said, what do you like about it? Not what can you do for me. What do you love? It's honest, I said after a beat. Numbers tell you what's true, even when people don't. Beautiful thing about data, he said. It forgives fewer lies. We were still standing there an hour later, the panel forgotten, when he asked the kind of question that doesn't belong at a networking event. What's one thing you wish more people knew about you? It emptied the space between us. I didn't rush to fill it. I watched a server navigate through the crowd with a tray of miniature quiches, watched the city's dusk lift itself into the windows like a second ceiling. When I finally spoke, I surprised myself with the precision of it. That I don't forgive easily, I said, but when I do, I never forget what happened. I just stop needing to carry it. He considered that, eyes steady. Is that closure? I shook my head. No, it's better. He nodded as if the answer changed something about the air we were sharing. We said goodnight without promises. It felt right. No exchange of debts, no hasty symmetry. Two people leaving the same room by separate doors, both of us content to carry only ourselves. On my way home, the city seemed newly legible. Every crosswalk, every shopfront, every light changing from red to green felt like a grammar I could finally read. Back at the condo, I didn't turn on the overheads. I let the marina's reflections stencil soft shapes onto the walls. The silence had that late-hour depth where even elevators sound like whales surfacing. I stood in it for a moment and thought, this is mine. Not a prize, not a consolation, just mine. Then I went to the drawer. I had promised myself I would do this when the noise was gone. The folder sat there like a sleeping animal, fatter than when it first traveled in my tote, swollen with copies, with the administrative detritus of war. Inside, statements, deeds, maintenance receipts, photo prints from a private investigator who delivered exactly what I paid for. There were notes I had written to myself after late-night fights, each one a small flare I refused to see. Keep records. Do not argue feelings when numbers exist. If he wanted to know the truth, he would ask for it. I carried the folder to the desk where the shredder waited. It hadn't earned its place there yet. I had always thought of it as a tool for junk mail and expired warranties. Tonight it was an instrument. I fed the pages in slowly at first, a ritual rather than a chore. The machine hummed its sober hymn, nibbling columns of figures into confetti. Mortgage statements that once mapped my fear and discipline became neat ribbons. Maintenance receipts went next. There a line about the furnace. Here, the roof repair, each strip thinning the weight of a story I had told myself for too long about duty. I slid in the photo prints. For a second, the image of Simon's hand curved around a stranger's waist tried to hold. Then the blades spoke their soft refusal, and it became no more powerful than junk mail. I didn't shred out of anger. I kept digital copies where my lawyer keeps things that need a chain of custody. This wasn't about evidence. This was about deciding which objects would live with me and which would live in files. I wasn't erasing the truth. I was retiring it from the role of proof. By the time the folder was empty, the waste bin was full of slender white strands, quiet as snowfall, cleaner than memory. I unplugged the shredder and sat back, palms warm from feeding the paper, a little breathless, as if I'd danced. There was, of course, a text from Simon waiting on my phone, Old reflexes die hard. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. He had already sent the only message that mattered when he told me, too late, that he hadn't understood the labor he demanded from me. Recognition is not repair. It is merely light, and light without heat cannot undo winter. I set the phone face down and felt no gravity pull me toward it. I rinsed a glass, filled it with water so cold it stung my teeth, and walked to the balcony. The docks stitched themselves with slow traffic. Couples with canvas bags from the night market, a boy carrying a kite as if the sky might change its mind. The wind carried salt and the rumor of rain. I thought of my first night in the hotel, the way I slept like someone who owned the moon. I smiled at the melodrama of that, then admitted it was true enough to keep. Inside, I made the bed the way I like it. Top sheet folded exactly once, blanket left loose at the foot because freedom needs drape. I pulled the curtains, but left a hand's width of window visible. In the morning, the light would find me at the ankle and climb. I turned off the lamp and stood in the dark long enough to hear my breath become the loudest thing. I didn't promise myself a gentler future. I didn't make oaths about never compromising again. I didn't draft a list of the qualities I would demand in any man who wanted to know me now. Those are the bargains people make when they still don't trust themselves. What I did was simpler. I decided that when the past knocked, and it would, because the past is clever and patient, I would look through the peephole and decide each time whether the visitor deserved tea. Most days, I suspected, I would let the kettle rest. I climbed into bed. The sheets had that cool first touch feeling of a hotel, the reward of fresh cotton. I closed my eyes and saw the day as a ledger, not debit and credit, not win and loss, just entries that finally balanced because I had chosen the units. The marina sighed outside. Somewhere a gull made its offended trumpet. Somewhere a person was unlocking a door they had feared for years. Somewhere an old life was clearing its throat to be archived. And in my small, quiet room, another page finished shredding. Invisible, internal, definitive. I slept. Not like someone escaping. Not like someone triumphant. I slept like a woman who had stopped negotiating with herself.